Welcome to the Happiness Kit.
My name is Veronica, and I'm so pleased to bring you this series of videos on healing depression. I'm an energy psychologist, and I help people heal from depression using the most advanced techniques from the field. The techniques are a self-healing process that I teach you in the course of the videos. All you have to do is follow along and do the exercises. Yes, depression can be healed, and you can heal yourself.
It's always puzzled me how we attempt to fix what is essentially an emotional well-being issue with drugs. What if we could find something to heal the emotional source? Well, there is something, and that's what these videos are about.
The video you are watching will help you identify the reasons why you are depressed. Once you've identified these, you will choose the video that will help you to heal.
Depression is rife in our society, so I just want to reassure you that you are not alone. I suffered from depression for many years without even knowing I was depressed. Despite plotting and thinking about suicide for months on end, and even after a suicide attempt. So know that I have walked this road and come out the other side completely depression-free. I have worked with many people on and not on medication and seen them recover completely from depression too. My experience was like a black cloud that hung permanently over my head, suddenly just simply not being there. For some people, it was more gradual. Some describe it as climbing out of a deep, dark pit where they couldn't see any light.
All you've got to do is be willing to try the techniques with me.
Your healing is in your hands.
The process is not a long, drawn-out one either. It can be as quick as a couple of days before you feel different. For some people, it can be a little bit longer. It just depends on what root causes you find. The videos will lead and guide you through that too.
Despite depression being rife in society, the medical industry doesn't really know what to do with it. Talk therapy can take years, and meanwhile people suffer. Medication is only effective for around 30% of people, and the side effects of medication, can be just dreadful. They can include anxiety, suicidal thoughts, apathy, no sex drive, and just a general lack of interest in life. Who needs these? Traditional models of treatment don't always consider the root causes of depression. And in all fairness, it is difficult for doctors to address this. They have 15 minutes with a patient, not enough time to get to this level. So they prescribe medication. And if you've ever been down this route, you know it is a trial and error until the right medication for you is found. And in the meantime, you suffer. There are, of course, situations where antidepressants can be useful in the short term. However, you do want to avoid being on them for a long time because of the side effects. Remember that medication just masks the symptoms. It doesn't heal the cause. Much better to find the root cause of your depression and heal it yourself. After all, we are our own best healers.
These techniques are designed for helping you to heal yourself, and you can use them whether you're on antidepressants or not.
Get to a point where you feel ready to come off them, please only do it under your doctor's supervision. Coming off them too quickly can cause really severe side effects, including suicidal thoughts. The medical industry has been by and large mystified by depression. A recent study I read says that it may be due to genetic factors, that there are genes for depression. Their conclusion? All humans carry lesser or greater numbers of genetic risk factors for major depression. If we all carry the genes, and not everyone has depression, maybe there are other causes than depression. So energy psychology has a different premise. It looks to our environment rather than to genetics to find the causes of depression. What do I mean by environment? I mean the soil in which we grew up. Much like good or bad soil affects the health of a young growing plant, so the environment in which we grow up affects our health. Because we don't leave this behind when we reach adulthood, it stays with us. Some call it emotional baggage that affects us until we deal with it. If the soil in which we grew up has an impact on our well-being, let's look at what particular soils can cause depression. In general, there are three main environmental causes of depression. These are a challenging event that shook your world, that caused you a high level of trauma at the time it happened. Adverse childhood experiences. Adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, are any of a list of events that doctors in extended studies in the US have identified to be a significant cause of childhood trauma. The third and probably most significant cause of depression is having a depressed parent or primary caregiver whilst growing up. This one is tricky as it's not always easy to identify. Many of our parents come from an era where depression wasn't spoken about or even diagnosed. But there are clues that lie in our childhood. The trick is to find them. Or you may know that one of your parents are or were depressed.
We'll be having a look later as to why this can result in us being depressed.
So let's look at the three causes: a challenging event, an adverse childhood experience that you're aware of, having a depressed parent growing up. Sometimes we know immediately what the challenging event was that set off our depression. These are usually major life events, like the loss of a job or career, loss of a partner, a medical trauma, or experiencing violent crime, even being a witness to a violent crime. Sometimes, however, this is not so easy to find. One way to find it is to think back to when your depression started. Can you pinpoint that? Can you remember what was happening in your life at the time, or even up to a year before? What happened to you or to the people you love at the time? Spend some time thinking about this. Try to identify the specific event or events that caused you to sink into hopelessness.
If you can't find anything, it is likely that the source of your depression lies elsewhere. So let's look further.
The second major cause of adult depression is experiencing one or more adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, when you were young. Even though these may have happened many years previously, our bodies and minds don't forget. They can often set us up for depression and other afflictions as adults. And it's the experiences that cause us ongoing and unpredictable stress as children that have the worst effects on us as adults. That's because of what it does to our minds. A once-off traumatic effect is bad enough. That's like being attacked by a bear on the way to the river. But what happens when the bear is constantly prowling around our house? We know it's there, but we don't know exactly where. We know it's going to pounce, but we don't know when. Can you imagine the level of anxiety this causes in our minds and bodies? It's like we're constantly walking on eggs. Here is a list of the known and categorized ACEs as defined by the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study in the USA. In order to identify the root cause of your current depression, make a note as to which of these you experienced growing up. I invite you to give yourself time to do this and pause the video while you do so. Here are some interesting stats that came out of the ACEs study. 18% of people with an ACE score of 1 had suffered from clinical depression. 30% of those with an ACE score of 3 and nearly 50% with an ACE score of 4 or more have suffered from chronic depression. For women alone, 24% with an ACE score of 1 and up to 60% of women with an ACE score of 4 or more had suffered from chronic depression. The loss of a parent in childhood triples the chances of depression in adulthood. Being raised by a mother with depression puts you at a higher risk of living with chronic pain as an adult. This is by no means a definitive list. New ACEs are being added all the time, and each can have a different impact on different individuals. What severely affects one person may not be so detrimental to another. Surprisingly, being regularly verbally put down by a parent has a slightly higher correlation to adult disease than even sexual abuse. Once again, disproving the childhood adage of "sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me."
So now you should have a list of your own ACEs from your childhood. This will be very useful for you when you start to heal yourself of your depression.
Why is it that what happened to us as a child can have such a profound effect on us as adults? Well, it's got to do with the way the mind works. When we are born, the part of our brain that controls logic is not fully formed. So we take everything that happens to us literally. Our literal brain is busy storing everything that happens to us, like in a big filing cabinet, with no logic to explain things. As these events happen, and as we figure out ways of surviving, the brain takes these and starts to form a very strong blueprint or pattern. This makes it easier for the brain. If it ever finds itself in a similar situation, it refers back to the events in the filing cabinet and what it did before to survive. And it simply repeats the behavior. It's like a shortcut, a coping mechanism. These patterns become the brain's normal. This works well unless what happened to us was harmful or not so good, because it can form patterns like being hypersensitive or shutting down when faced with conflict, or overeating to cope with painful emotions. Or it can form beliefs like, "There's something wrong with me, I'm not good enough, people don't like me," or "I never succeed at anything." That's why for healing to be really effective, we need to go back to things that happened when we were young.
We also need a way of healing these, not just talking about them. And that's what these videos are all about.
Now we are going to talk about the final known cause of depression, and that's if you had a depressed parent or primary caregiver whilst growing up. You will notice that this is listed as an ACE, but because it is so common, I am treating it as an issue on its own. So let's unpack this a little. You are going to need a pen and paper to write for this exercise. Even if you have identified your depression as a challenging event or a different ACE, I really encourage you to do this exercise anyway. Spend a while thinking of your childhood. Write down insights. How did it feel? What was your mom like? Your dad? The relationship between them? Do you know if one of your parents was depressed? Did your mother perhaps suffer from postnatal depression? If you can, it will be useful to ask her. Remember that in many of our parents' generation, depression wasn't spoken about. There was a huge stigma attached to any mental issues. So many people just struggled on, trying to cope on their own. So your parent may not have been diagnosed with depression. This is why we look at the feel of your childhood and your general impression of your parents while growing up. Try to remember things like if your family home had a feeling of fun and lightness, or sternness and seriousness. This could be a clue. Did one of your parents sigh a lot, look sad a lot? Were their shoulders often hunched over? Or did they need to escape to their bedroom to listen to music or be away from the kids without explanation? We really need to be detectives here and find every clue we can. Try to remember common phrases or sayings in your family. Write these down. This could be things like, "Life is hard," "Good things never happen to this family," the ... family only has bad luck, "Life's a struggle and don't you forget it," "Nothing in life comes easy," and sayings like that.
I invite you to pause the video now while you do the exercise. You will need these notes in the healing section.
Just as our adverse childhood experiences can have a profound effect on our lives as adults, so can having a depressed parent, and for the same reason. Whatever environment we're born into is our normal. And guess what? We are going to create this as we become adults because it feels normal, and our brain likes normal. Anything else feels threatening. Remember, our non-logic brain takes everything literally. It has no logic to figure out the real story, and it is only interested in keeping us safe and alive. So it will repeat the pattern of normal even if it's harmful to us. If we had a childhood that felt down and heavy and not light and fun, we're likely to recreate this as an adult. Imagine a little girl in a cute dress and pigtails coming bouncing into the living room to tell mom or dad about something. She's all excited and happy, and mom or dad are sitting depressed on the couch, unable to laugh with her and share her delight. They may even tell her to go away or keep quiet because mommy's got a headache. Can you imagine how this would take the wind out of her sails? She's immediately going to depress her natural exuberance. And if this is a regular occurrence, guess what's going to be her normal?
If this video has resonated with you, now is the time to go further and heal your depression.
We've looked at the major causes of depression, and you should have been able to identify which one of these is the root cause of your depression. There can be more than one cause. In that case, choose the video that feels most relevant and start there.